title of the message this morning is The Oversoul. So we're going to be looking at Ralph Waldo Emerson in his writings, one of his essays entitled The Oversoul. 2 months ago we looked at a Hindu Upanishad, and it talked about the idea that that the self is the life of the life and all that is. And last month we looked at a Sufi writing, and he said that wherever I go, whatever I do, only God I see. And today Emerson's going to introduce another name for the same idea, the Oversoul, that he equates with God, with the self, with the eternal one. And so we look at some of the parallels and some of the things that Emerson says about this. The whole idea of our oneness, the whole idea of the fact that we are one with God, the one that we don't look outside ourselves for something to take care of us or to give us, but that we are part of that eternal soul, that eternal oversoul, is an exciting one for me. And it was a radical idea at the time when Emerson was taken up. The transcendentalist movement that was speaking, it came out in the early 1800s. In 1803, when Emerson was born, Thomas Jefferson was president. It was his first turn as president. He served 2 terms, and right about the time of the Louisiana Purchase. And so it was a radical time. He was coming up with this idea of God in such a way that was again, totally radically different from what the established, if you will, the Christian and other faiths at that time were believing. And so today we kind of read and go, wow, that's nice, that's nice. We realize that at the time that this came out, it was a radical departure from what was thought and what was believed. So what I'd like to do is look at one of the paragraphs from The Oversoul that I think captures a lot of what this writing, what he's trying to bring across through this writing. And again, we'll see parallels between what he says in the Oversoul and what the other writers have said the last couple of months in what we've read. The paragraph starts off, "The supreme critic on the errors of the past and the present, and the only prophet of that which must be, is that great nature in which we rest, as the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere, that unity, that oversoul, within which every man's particular being is contained, and made one with all other. The supreme critic on the errors of the past and the present, and the only prophet of that which must be." Again, he's addressing this whole idea that what he's bringing out, what he's trying to say is, we're talking about God here. We're not talking about just some idea, some alternative, or this or that, and there's this and there's that. He's saying this is who God is. That God is the supreme critic, the prophet that knows all things, that is all things. That's who we're a part of. That's who we are part of. It's we're not taking a lesser God, if you will. We're not taking a smaller picture of that to placate ourselves with, but we're finding that the God that we see within ourselves, the God that we know, is the God of all, the God of everything. And I like that picture. It's that great nature in which we rest, as the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere. If we picture the atmosphere holding up the earth, lying in the soft arms of the atmosphere. The atmosphere and the earth, of course, are one, and in the same idea, we lie in the soft arms of the oversoul, of God, the self, if you will. And we're taken care of. And it says, which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all the other. We are one with each other. This whole idea of our oneness goes corporate as far as the whole of society, but then all of who we are is one with the other. The idea is similar again to the one, the last 2 writers that we've talked about. The Upanishad talks about the self is the life of life, rising above the senses and the mind, and renouncing separate existence. In other words, he said too, there is no separate existence. There is no otherness to God. There is no otherness to A lot of different faith traditions see God as being something other, out there somewhere, maybe the beard in the chair and up in heaven, waiting to welcome us and judge us, and yes, no, yes, no. But what he's saying is that in this picture, the Upanishad saying that renouncing that idea of separate existence, and seeing that God is one with all of us, that God is, and we are all one with God. And then the Sufi writer from a month ago talked about the fact that neither soul nor body, accident nor substance, qualities nor causes. I don't see any of those things. Only God I see. Only God I see. And so that whole idea, again, we're seeing this parallel idea formed through several different faith traditions. This idea that we are one with God, and different ways to say the same thing using different words. Ways to say the same thing using different words and see God within ourselves. And Emerson goes on to say that that oversoul within which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all other, that common heart of which all conversation is worship, to which all right action is submission. There are those who would want to draw up two parts to life. There's the sacred, and then there's the secular. They'd like to suggest that there are things in life that are sacred. If we want to do prayer, or we do some kind of other religious practice or experience, whatever, that we would call that sacred. But then there are things that are seen as secular, and they're more tolerated than, we have to eat food. We are sexual beings. We have to watch football on Sunday afternoons. These things are tolerated. They're seen as secular and even profane, as some would describe them. And so what Emerson is saying is that we drop that distinction. That all sincere conversation is worship. All sincere conversation is worship. When we come together and we talk with each other, and we share ideas, we share how the day is going, we share time together, God is in our midst. And we are worshiping that which is all that we are when we come together and we spend that time together. We don't say, well, okay, now we're going to talk football, so we're going to get away from the sacred. But all conversation, all of our interaction is sacred. God doesn't leave the room and say, okay, well, if you want to go, talk about that, there's another room over there for that. But all of it is shared, all of it, and again, all right action is submission. Again, there are some things that people would say, this is sacred and this is not. And what Emerson is suggesting is that is a false dichotomy, if you will, a false separation of the two. That all we are and everything we do is sacred, is wrapped up in the presence of the oversoul, in the presence of God, the self, if you will. He goes on to write that overpowering reality which confutes our tricks and talents and constrains everyone to pass for what he is and to speak from his character and not from his tongue, and which evermore tends to pass into our thought and our hand and become wisdom and virtue and power and beauty. That oversoul, that overpowering reality which confutes our tricks and talents. I'm not sure I always like that. There are times when I want to get away with being able to on my tricks and my talents, instead of coming up and saying, well, this is who I am, and going on by my character. I'd like to kind of juggle in front of everybody, go, ooh, and don't pay attention to who he is, just look at what he's doing. And I kind of like to get away with that and live on that shallower level, if you will, so that you don't look deeper down and say, well, who is this? Who is this person? Whatever. But I think what the author is saying here, and the truth that comes out at the end when he says, and whichever more tends to pass into our thought, our hand, and become wisdom and virtue and power and beauty. The idea that the oversoul confutes our tricks and our talents is not a condemnation. It's an invitation. It's a reminder that says, We are of God. Our very character is of God. Who we truly are is of God. And so we don't need to hide from that. We don't need to. There are days when we're just, we're not on top of the game or whatever. We're not feeling all that well, that sort of thing. And so but even in those moments, our character doesn't diminish. Our character doesn't disappear. Again, God doesn't walk away and say, well, not now. When you decide to be better, I'll come back. The character, that oneness with God, the person that we are doesn't change, doesn't go away, doesn't leave. And so we know that on a regular, on a consistent, moment-by-moment basis. And so the invitation then is to recognize we are always welcome. You don't have to trick me. God says you don't have to impress me. You don't have to do anything to make me think that you're more than you are. Because we are of God, we are enough. Because we are of God and our very nature is of that being, we are enough. And so that we don't need to, again, juggle or tap dance to impress God and to make sure that God's going to stand by. I've spent a lot of time in different faith traditions, whatever, where that was the case, where you better be dancing, you better be doing some things that are making you look really good and really holy, or you're going to lose out. You're going to lose out. And so what Emerson is saying very clearly is God is always there. We don't lose that nature of our beingness with anything that we might do or say. And he talks about the fact that God tends to pass into our thought and hand and become wisdom and virtue and power and beauty. That's who we are. That's who we are. When we're tempted to think otherwise of ourselves, those little gnawing voices in the back of our heads are trying to tell us that maybe we don't measure up. Maybe we're not all that whatever. We remind ourselves that the oversoul, that God within us is virtue, wisdom, power, and beauty. And again, the truth of that. It doesn't waver, it doesn't change with circumstances. The truth is that's who we are, and that's who the character of God is within each one of us. He goes on to say, we live in succession, in division, in parts and particles. In other words, we live in succession. There's a strata, okay? I'm a vice president, eventually I'll be the president, or I'm in this group at this stand, eventually I'll be the captain of the team and I'll do this. And so we live in succession. We're not whole until we get to a certain point. Or we live in division. There's us and there's them. There's the other team and then there's us. We see ourselves as in division, as us and them. Giants fans understand that might be the case today. But what he says is when we see ourselves in those parts, and we see ourselves in parts as this and that, and he says in the meantime, when we see ourselves that way, in the meantime, when we start to try to think we're divided and we're made up of different things and we're separated from each other and different from each other. In the meantime, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. Within each man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence. That is one of the things that all faiths, almost every faith, shares. Some practice, some form of silence, some form of meditation or quiet that among all of the readings and all the prayers and things that you're supposed to do and this kind of stuff, everyone comes back and says, we really should spend time in quiet because God really manifests, or we really see God more clearly in that silence. God doesn't usually make noise. God doesn't not. What we have to do is find that place of silence where all of a sudden we realize, God is there. He had a friend who was going through some difficult circumstances in their life, and they were had found out a couple of news that were just really upsetting, and they found themselves driving on the highway and just crying, just trying to figure out how to get this solved and that solved, and they just pulled over and stopped and got quiet for a minute, and they said, there you are, there you are. And that's where God is found, in that silence. If we can put away the chatter, if we can put away those arguments that try to come up and tell us that we're not all that we think we are, we find that in the silence. And again, it's an idea that's shared by most, if not all, faiths. There's an article I read about from the newspaper in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and the newspaper asked questions of some of the spiritual leaders in that town about that verse, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I'm God. What does that say in your certain faith, whatever? And so the Roman Catholic bishop in town says, I need to find an inner silence that switches off the inner stream of thoughts, images, and feelings. Without this, transformation would not be possible. So as the Catholics have a practice of silence. It's a part of the faith, the regular measure of it. And then we go to the Protestants at Hillhurst United Church, and it says, the psalmist says, God is the still small voice within. So often our lives are so noisy we can't hear that voice. We need to be intentional about creating it. We need to be intentional about creating it. And so in the Protestant church, again, there is a practice of silence, that wise silence where I hear the truth, where I hear the reality that is. And I stop listening to the chatter that's going on, telling me all kinds of different things. Then he goes on in the Calgary Imam, founder of the Islamic Supreme Council of Canada, says, avoiding unnecessary talk and remaining silent is the key to spiritual growth. Remaining silent is the key to spiritual growth. Again, the recognition that within that wise silence, I find God. Within that wise silence. And it's shared in several different faiths. And the rabbi from the local Jewish congregation says, Jewish sages valued silence as vital to living a meaningful life. Through the practice of silence and meditation, a person could best serve God. And so we see that as Emerson talked about, that wise silence, it's not something just that he just stumbled upon, whatever. It's a practice, it's an idea, reality that all faiths, almost all faiths, if not all of them, have some sort of practice, some sort of recognition of a time to spend in silence, a time to spend in that quietness, to remind ourselves God is there. God is there. All this other circumstances, all these other things might be going on and vying for our attention, vying for our time, and upsetting us or getting us turned or whatever. But when I'll take time to just be quiet, I'll take time to be silent, I hear the wisdom. I see God. I find that the truth that I am of God comes through a lot more clearly, because the competition just is tended to go away. And then all I can do is hear, quote unquote, hear God and know, and I know that God is. And the universal beauty, the whole idea that beauty is a universal. Sometimes we have judgments on what beauty is, and this goes, this is this pretty, and this is this beautiful, and this is all this. And what he's saying is, in this realm, in this context, beauty is universal. Beauty is universal. That each of us shares that beauty that is God. That is the universal beauty, and to which every part and particle is equally related. There are no strata. There's no strata. There's no caste system within God, within this whole idea of the oversoul. We are all equally related. We all can know the fullness of God. We can all know the totality of God within our lives. There's no dues to pay or way. In this life, next life maybe I'll be a rock, and then I can move up the standard or whatever. I can know God holy, and the eternal, again, another title for the Oversoul, the Eternal One. The Eternal One. We are all one with God. And he says, and this deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is all accessible to us is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. I like that mystical idea of the thing being seen and the thing seeing are one. And this deep power in which we exist, whose beatitude is all accessible to us. I looked up the word beatitude because I wasn't sure what it meant. I know that in the Bible, Matthew, there's 9 beatitudes. You know, blessed are, and all that. So I knew that, but I didn't really know what the word beatitude was. So I looked it up in Webster's dictionary, and it says a state of total bliss. Beatitude is a state of total bliss, and so. In that context, it says, in this deep power within which we exist, and the state of total bliss is all accessible to us. In other words, God doesn't hide. God doesn't hide himself, or God doesn't hide God's self from us. God doesn't say, here's a little, it's all accessible to us. We determine how much of that we'll enjoy. We determine how much of that we'll put ourselves into finding, into knowing. We'll determine by how much care we take in developing and maintaining that silence within ourselves. We'll determine how accessible that state of bliss really is to us. And we do it by the practices, by the things we do in our lives. That is, again, God makes God's self totally accessible. There's no hiding, there's no, Later on, when you get to the next realm, then you really get to know God. All of God is available to us today, and that's, I think, what is being said here. And then again, he says, the act of seeing and the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. Right now, there's an illusion that you and I are separate from each other. The person next to you is separate from you. There's that illusion. But when we look beyond that, we realize the whole makeup of atoms and cells and all that kind of stuff, we realize that it is an illusion. There is no separation. There is no difference between us. We are one. We are one being. We are the Oversoul. And he goes on to say, we see the world piece by piece as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree. But the whole, of which these are the shining parts, is the soul. And again, that whole idea again that I see things as being separate. I see things as being different and made up. And he talks about animals. It's interesting. He talks about animals in here. That suggesting that the animals are also a part of the one, part of the oneness that is God. I was watching the news the other day. And there was a story about dogs. That they have found that dogs can detect cancer, and they would take samples from people who were cancerous, whatever, and samples that were not, and they'd put them in this room, and the dogs would go in and look, and then within 80% accuracy rating, they would find the one that was cancerous. And so there is a connection there, a connection between. Again, nothing is singled out. Nothing is separated out. All that is a part of the one. And then he said, well, again, it's radical. The thinking, the way we're kind of used to it. But at the time, when this first came out, these ideas came out, it was a very radical. And still, if I'll go back to Bright and share these ideas, I'll be seen as being pretty radical, radically different than the rest of the class, which is something I get to do. Something I get to do. I embrace it with more or less enthusiasm, depending on the day or the circumstance. But only by the vision of that wisdom can the horoscope of the ages be read. And by falling back on our better thoughts, by yielding to the spirit of prophecy which is innate in every man, we can know what it saith. The horoscope, only by this wisdom, only by this understanding that God is one with us, only by this understanding that we and God are one, that there is no separation, there is no otherness. Only when I come from that place, what he's suggesting, only when I come from that place, can I really know the truth of life. Only when I come from that place can I really know the truth of life. That the horoscope of the ages, the prophecy of the future. And again, in direct conflict to this idea that there is, quote unquote, inspired writing, canonized literature, where God has revealed God's self in only one place, in only one book, or in this way or that way. What he's saying is all of us, when we live in that place, when we live in that place of intuition, we live in that place of oneness with God, only in that place can we truly find the Spirit that is the eternal Spirit, the horoscope of the ages, if you will. And that this prophecy is innate in each one of us. This idea, this understanding of the universe, this understanding of eternity is innate in each one of us. Not something that we need to go find or look, but again, go deeper and deeper into that silence to see and to find, to see God. That innate knowingness, that innate oneness that says, yeah, I know. That is something that Emerson suggests is innate in each one of us, rather than being something we have to go outside to look for. He finishes up the paragraph by talking about the fact that not everybody gets this. Not everybody's going to see this. Not everybody's going to relate to God in this certain way. He says, every man's words who speaks from that life must sound vain to those who do not dwell in the same thought or on their own part. I dare not speak for it. My words do not carry its august sense. They fall short and cold. Only itself, only God can inspire whom God will. And behold, their speech shall be lyrical and sweet and universal as the rising of the wind. And this whole idea that, again, when I come from that place, if I'm talking to someone who's not there, I might even sound silly. They're just a not know. It's like, where are you? What? Not sure what's coming on there, because again, and in the same way that if they came, someone else from another tradition tried to come and share what we would. Okay, I'm not sure I get that. I'm not sure I get that. And Emerson, the master of words, he's so much fun to read. One sentence, a paragraph is something to chew on, but even every sentence has so much to it. And he says himself, I dare not speak for it. My words do not carry its august sense. And that whole sense that if I want to hear that truth within me, if I want to hear that lyrical, sweet voice within me and be that voice, I need to have that inspiration from God myself. It's a personal thing. It's something that I need to experience and to foster, if you will, myself to know. Otherwise, again, if I look at it, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But once I do see it, once I do get to that place where I recognize the oneness with God and then those words start to make sense. And he says, yet I desire, even by profane words, if I may not use sacred, to indicate the heaven of this deity and to report what hints I have collected of the transcendent simplicity and energy of the highest law. I got to talk about it. I don't really understand it. I can't really say what it is. I can't put it into words in such a way that will totally encapsulate what it is that's being said. How do you say God? How do you say the Oversoul? How do you say the Eternal One in such a way that it creates the picture of what that actually is, of who that actually is? It can't be done. But as we listen, as we spend time with whatever, it dawns on us. It dawns on us, and so we get to talk about what it is in whatever capacity we can to say what we're experiencing and what we're knowing. And so again, like the Upanishad, like the Sufi writer, they each believe in this idea of our oneness with God. They each believe that all are saying the same thing using different words. And so all of them are inviting us to this adventure. All of them are inviting us in different ways to this adventure of living with that oneness of God as our reality.